Welcome to Gnothi Seauton. You are the mysteries. With me, Chuck Dunning. In 2019, the content of this video was originally provided as a lecture for the College of Freemasonry hosted by the Scottish Rite Valley of Rochester, New York. The college is an excellent biennial event organized by my friend, brother Bill Edwards, and there's a link for more information in this video's description. I later adapted this content for the third chapter in my fourth book, The Mystic Tie and the Way of Oneness, published in 2024. In its most superficial sense, the term mystery simply refers to things about Masonry that are concealed or hidden, at least hypothetically, from those who are uninitiated. Because so many details of our initiatic rites are meant to be kept secret in this way, the word mysteries has at times been used as a synonym for those rites. In that regard, Masonry is like the mystery schools of the ancient world. For thousands of years, cultures like the Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians maintained rites of religious and philosophical education that were provided only to initiates, or mystei in Greek, who were sworn to secrecy. But there is a deeper sense in which the word mysteries is fitting for those ancient traditions, and to dig into that sense we can consult the works of Plato, student of Socrates and teacher of Aristotle. Plato was undoubtedly an initiate, and many scholars have concluded that his work contains ideas and inspirations from his experience of the mysteries. For instance, in the dialogue Phaedo, Plato has Socrates praising initiate philosophers when he says, quote, "To be numbered amongst whom I have bent all the effort of a lifetime." End quote. According to Plato, the highest intention of the mysteries was to facilitate initiates' contemplative discovery of the intelligible or ideal realm, for it is only in the ideal that we find the true nature of things and their source. Plato makes it clear that the intelligible or ideal realm is metaphysical or spiritual, transcending our ordinary sense perceptions and habitual ways of thinking, and so it usually seems hidden or concealed from us. Thus, the ancient mysteries were not only mysterious because their inner workings were kept secret, but also because their rites and teachings addressed humanity's timeless questions about the mysterious truths of things like life, death, rebirth, the nature of the soul, and even the essential truth of existence itself. If, as Plato insists, the greatest truths of such things lie beyond our ordinary ways of thinking, then the manner of teaching about them must also be extraordinary. This is why the ancient mysteries taught through the use of ritual, myth, and symbol, just as Masonry does. So far, we have already seen some parallels between the ancient mysteries and Freemasonry. We have specifically noted that both traditions require initiation and oaths of secrecy, and both use ritual, myth, and symbol as means of teaching. Perhaps the most significant question now is, do they share a common purpose? Do the rites and teachings of Freemasonry intentionally provide their initiates with opportunities to contemplate the ideals of mysterious things like life, death, rebirth, the nature of the soul, and even the essential truth of existence itself? Many Masonic scholars and authors have answered that question with a resounding yes. Some of them have gone into great detail on the subject, and the most conscientious of them have agreed with Joseph Fort Newton when he writes, quote, "Masonry stands in this tradition, and if we may not say that it is historically related to the great ancient orders, it is their spiritual descendant, and renders much the same ministry to our age which the mysteries rendered to the olden world. This at least is true. The greater ancient mysteries were prophetic of Masonry, whose drama is an epitome of universal initiation, and whose simple symbols are the depositaries of the noblest wisdom of mankind. As such, it brings men together at the altar of prayer, keeps alive the truths that make us men, seeking by every resource of art to make tangible the power of love, the worth of beauty, and the reality of the ideal. End quote. So, having established the parallel, let's attempt to pass through the door of the ancient mysteries, get to the most central concern of their myths and symbolism, and see how that relates with the mysteries of our craft. Of course, the mixed blessing of myths and symbols is that they conceal as well as reveal their deeper meanings. Myths and symbols are subject to speculation and interpretation, which can be limited to ordinary ways of thinking, despite the intentions of the teachers who devised them. In another of Plato's dialogues, Phaedrus, Socrates talks about problems arising from interpretations that attempt to take the mysteries, myths, and symbols as speaking only of historical events and physical realities. He says, quote, I have no leisure for such inquiries. Shall I tell you why? I must first know myself, as the Delphian inscription says. End quote. And so we have been given the first part of this presentation's title, Gnothi Seauton, meaning know thyself. This admonition was inscribed in the forecourt of the Temple of Delphi in ancient Greece, a place where an entranced priestess would speak a prophecy in response to a seeker's question. Imagine that. You have gone in search of divinely inspired guidance, and before you even enter the temple, you are reminded to know yourself. Socrates references this inscription in saying the mysteries inspire him to work at knowing himself rather than to try making literal sense of their myths and symbols. A more extensive aphorism of this nature has been attributed to many ancient philosophers, including our friend and brother Pythagoras, who influenced Plato. Quote, Man, know thyself, then thou shalt know the universe and God. End quote. This statement is very significant because it clarifies that self-knowledge is not only of the utmost importance, but that it is the key to knowing the transcendent truths that were the highest aim of the ancient mysteries. This key to the most profound wisdom has its parallels in other ancient traditions. For example, in Kabbalah, we are reminded that the book of Genesis says we are created in the image of God and with the breath of God. It is further explained that the essential light of each soul is a spark of the divine light. It is thus a Kabbalistic principle that the more we contemplate the nature and dynamics of the soul, the better we understand the nature and dynamics of creation, and thus the better we know our Creator. This Kabbalistic principle is mirrored in the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, which is quoted in some of our rites. Likewise, in Vedanta, the ancient wisdom tradition of India, we find the saying, Tat Tvam Asi, translated as thou art that, meaning the true self in you, your spiritual essence, is one with the divine self. In other words, the mysteries of the self are inextricably intertwined with the mysteries of existence and the mysteries of the divine. So, you are the mysteries. But remember that we came to this point in consideration of whether the central focus of the Masonic mysteries is the same as that of the ancient mysteries. So now the question has become whether or not our craft urges us to contemplate the most essential and mysterious things about ourselves. To begin answering that question, let's revisit the kinds of questions asked of a candidate from the onset of initiation and throughout the fraternal experience. Without using the specific language of our ritual, Masons should recognize their similarities to these questions, which are the questions that all thoughtful people ask themselves from time to time. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why are you here? Where are you going? What are you looking for? Why is that important to you? While our ritual prescribes answers that harken back to the past of operative Masonry, we should recall that we are speculative Masons and thus recognize the traditional answers are meant to be mythic and symbolic. If we take the questions seriously and regard them and their answers as more than a ritual formality, then we can easily see how each question points us straight back to ourselves, for it is only within ourselves that we can find our most genuine, authentic, and unprescribed answers. So instead of responding to the question, "Who are you?" with the ritually prescribed answer, I might answer by saying, "My name is Chuck. I'm the son of Buddy and Joyce. I'm married to Susan. I'm an American. I'm a Freemason." And I could go on to list my vocation, religion, ethnicity, and so on. Answers like these are important, but as important as they still have not crossed the threshold of ordinary thinking that Plato says we must cross in order to approach the ideal. Leaving behind all the ordinary answers we might have, and thus descending into the deeper depths of such questions, or ascending into their higher heights, we discover that they do indeed lead us beyond any easy answers and into the mysteries of our very existence. Let's also consider that when a new Masonic initiate receives the first set of working tools, we clarify that a Mason is not only a worker, but also the material upon which the work is done. As is revealed in many of our monitors, we further explain the aim of the work is to make oneself more fitting for, quote, that spiritual building, that house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens, end quote. Which is to say, the goal is a metaphorical, metaphysical temple in the intelligible or ideal realm. In that same presentation of these tools, we also teach that they represent principles by which one may self-regulate thoughts, attitudes, and conduct. These principles can only be understood and applied by our faculties of heart and mind. And so we can deduce that the most essential working tool of Freemasonry is consciousness itself. Consciousness is the tool that not only comprehends and applies all our other symbolic tools, but also produces them from itself. In accord with Socrates, Pythagoras, and thus the inscription at the Temple of Delphi, we have discovered that consciousness is the key to unlocking all the mysteries we can unlock. And it is therefore the point within the circle of all our work as Freemasons, just as it was in the ancient mysteries. It is the most essential mystery we seek to contemplatively reveal, or, in the symbolic language of our tradition, consciousness is light and the lost word. At this point, our primary question becomes this: how can we more intentionally and effectively take this journey beyond the veils of ordinary thinking and into the mysteries of consciousness. As a guide, Plato provides us with the analogy of the divided line, and its theory has already been referenced numerous times throughout this presentation. At the top of this line, you see the point within the circle and the words, the form of the good. In Plato's dialogues, forms are regarded as the metaphysical or spiritual realities that give rise to or are reflected by the physical objects that we encounter with our senses. Those forms are posited to be unchanging and eternal, and thus more real than physical objects, which are changing and temporary. Kabbalists have a similar theory about the nature of creation, which was influenced by Neoplatonic philosophy. In Kabbalah, creation continually emanates from the Godhead down through planes or worlds of manifestation. The highest of those worlds is called Atzilut, which literally means emanation. At this level, there is only the radiation of divine light, which has within it every potential, or form in Plato's terminology, for all that can possibly exist. For this reason, contemporary Kabbalists sometimes speak of Atzilut as the archetypal world. Plato suggests there is an ultimate form that is the essential truth of all things. He calls that essential truth the form of the good, or simply the good. Because it is the essential truth of all things, that which all things have in common, it unites all things. We hear the same idea echoed in the Apostle Paul's words to the Greek Athenians in the New Testament book of Acts, when he says God is that in which we live and move and have our being. In Plato's book The Republic, he likens the form of the good to the sun, radiating the light that makes life and sight possible in our physical world. Thus, on this diagram, we have the sign of the sun, the point within the circle, which is also the alchemical emblem of gold, representing the highest aim of initiated philosophers. Note that this same sign was also used by the Pythagoreans to represent the monad, the one that is the source of all things and which contains all things. The rest of the line represents a continuum of different kinds of thinking or faculties and states of consciousness. It is divided into two general parts, the upper for the metaphysical, intelligible, or ideal realm, the realm of truest knowledge, and the lower for the visible realm, where we experience things through the five senses, and where our understandings of them are opinions, which may or may not have much truth to them. In the visible realm, the bottom segment is labeled akasia, which literally means imagination in modern Greek. Plato didn't mean the faculty of imagination itself, but the inability to distinguish between imagination and reality. The English words illusion and conjecture are placed here to offer some clarity. Illusion, meaning that which is mistaken for being real, and conjecture, meaning poorly informed guesswork taken as a basis for one's opinions and actions. This segment is where we are at our most ignorant and brutish, basically operating on autopilot, having knee-jerk reactions to almost everything. In terms of modern depth psychology, this is our state of mind when we are projecting our own unconscious conflicts, biases, and repressed impulses onto the world around us, rather than realizing and managing their presence within us. In this state, our consciousness of ourselves is almost completely limited to superficial awareness of our physical bodies and feelings of physical and emotional comfort or discomfort with things. These feelings form the basis of our opinions and attitudes, and we act out of those feelings with little to no reflection. The next segment in the visible realm is labeled pistis, the Greek word for faith, trust, or belief. We have common sense printed on the diagram to clarify that at this level, our opinions and attitudes are almost entirely shaped by what our cultures commonly implant into and expect from us. This level is all about rules, political platforms, religious doctrines, and many other collective lists of do's and don'ts in our thinking and behavior. So at this level, our thinking is a somewhat more sophisticated process of determining what opinions and attitudes, including about morality and ethics, are most congruent with our usual associates. We exercise self-awareness to the extent necessary to check our opinions, attitudes, and behaviors in order to get more of what we want and less of what we don't want in our particular social environment. At some point, our faith, trust, and belief in what we have been conditioned to think and do can become so habitual that we go back to operating on autopilot and having knee-jerk reactions, but typically in conformity with our particular community's norms. But not all societies are culturally homogeneous, and thus there is less commonality within them. It is both a challenge and a benefit of cultural diversity that it makes it harder to sleepwalk through life with nothing but common sense. Living with and embracing diversity constantly urges us to question ourselves and the cultural foundations of our views and feelings about things. On that note, let's recall this beautiful statement about religious diversity in Masonry from Anderson's Constitutions. Quote, "A Mason is obliged by his tenure to obey the moral law, and if he rightly understands the art, he will never be a stupid atheist nor an irreligious libertine. But though in ancient times Masons were charged in every country to be of the religion of that country or nation, whatever it was, yet 'tis now thought more expedient only to oblige them to that religion in which all men agree, leaving their particular opinions to themselves, that is, to be good men and true, or men of honor and honesty, by whatever denominations or persuasions they may be distinguished, whereby Masonry becomes the center of union and the means of conciliating true friendship among persons that must have remained at a perpetual distance." End quote. From a Platonic perspective, Anderson's exhortation to set aside opinions and aim for a center of union and true friendship all suggests he is calling for us to cross the threshold from the visible realm and common sense and move into the intelligible realm where together we can contemplate and know the deeper realities and ideals upon which morality is based. In doing so, we may develop a higher knowledge and enjoyment of our unity in the transcendent form of the good, the ultimate essence of all things. In that light, the mystic tie of which we speak so fondly would be much more than sentiments of belonging, but rather the ideal form or archetype of brotherly love. But we must first approach the threshold of the intelligible or ideal realm by beginning to question what we think we know. We develop hypotheses about how things might be different than we have been told or previously understood. In short, our contemplations are about speculating on different possibilities of meaning. But it is in the testing of those hypotheses that we can actually cross the threshold. Plato says the testing of our speculations is performed through dianoia, which we translate as discursive thinking. In this context, it refers to critical thinking, making use of logical reasoning in an attempt to discern what can and cannot be true about something. When we apply this entire process to ourselves, we begin to apprehend the different faculties and dynamics of our own psyches and the geometry of their relationships with each other. One of the many things we can discover in this process is that we are more mysterious to ourselves than we may have ever before noticed. We have dreams that perplex us. We feel emotions that surprise us. We do things despite our desires and intentions not to do them, and we don't do the things we desire and intend to do. We find that everything we like to think of as permanent and unchanging about ourselves is, in fact, temporary and changing. Thus, from a Platonic perspective, we simply aren't as real as we want to believe we are. Said another way, our self-concept, our notion of who and what we are, isn't as truthful as it could be. Even so, we can know without doubt that there is something absolutely true and permanent about our being. For example, following a contemplative process of observation and discursive thinking, the philosopher René Descartes arrived at his famous dictum, "I think, therefore I am." This realization gets us closer to the essential truth of our being. Descartes isn't saying his thought makes him exist, but rather it is undeniable evidence of his mind, which is undeniable evidence of his existence. Yet even thought, as we typically experience it, comes and goes and is ever changing, which is also true of our sense perceptions and emotions. Thus we come to understand that the most essential truth we perceive in the fact of our mental processes must transcend those processes. And when we carefully attend to their comings and goings, we realize that they do so in a kind of field that is more stable than they are. That field is our awareness, our ability to recognize and react to stimuli. Still, awareness itself shifts and slides in one direction or another, waxes and wanes, and even seems to totally disappear at times, such as in dreamless sleep or coma, and then reappear seemingly out of nowhere when we awaken. We now ask whether or not there is anything more real than awareness. It would appear that this question leads in the same direction Socrates points, which is to the self, the soul, psyche, or as we have previously considered, consciousness itself, that which can be either aware or unaware. Socrates' statement indicates he still only partially knows the truth of himself. He is aware of some things about himself, but not all things. Well, at least he is aware of that much. Likewise, Plato regards the truest nature of things to remain hidden, even from dianoia, the process of discursive reasoning that Socrates has mastered. Plato says that in order to know the highest truths, we must move into the upper segment of the line labeled noesis, which we may call direct intuition. Here we aren't using the word intuition in its common sense of a hunch based on superficial observations. That actually belongs much further down the divided line. The word intuition literally means to look into, and in terms of noesis, it means to be directly aware of something, even more aware than we are through the limited perceptions of our senses. For example, you think, therefore you know you exist. You don't need to look in a mirror, hear your voice, or argue and analyze yourself into that knowledge, and you don't need anyone else to confirm it. It isn't a conclusion or an abstraction, but is immediate, undeniable, and self-evident. But is there more we can know with that same kind of direct intuition? And if there is, then how do we come to that knowledge? Yes, according to Plato, there is more to be directly known. It can happen when we have exercised dianoia to the extent that our reasoning points to the reality of something we have not perceived with the senses, yet which our reasoning cannot fully explain. Consider that moment of mysterious conviction experienced by scientists and mathematicians when all their work points toward a solution to their problem for which nothing can yet account. And perhaps even more relevant to our present reflections, consider the profound depth reached by the mystics of all religions when they realize all their emotions, images, and words fail to account for the truth of anything worthy of the name God, the Absolute, or Truth with a capital T. In Psalms 46:10 we are told, quote, "Be still and know that I am God." End quote. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells his student Arjuna, quote, "In the still mind, in the depths of meditation, the eternal self reveals itself." End quote. Lao Tzu, the patriarch of Taoism, taught, quote, "Attain utmost vacuity, hold fast to quietude. This reversion belongs to the eternal. To know the eternal is enlightenment." End quote. These ancient sources of wisdom, and many more, urge us to understand that our thoughts and feelings are always veils on the deeper truths of things. We must part those veils by contemplatively opening our hearts and minds to consciousness itself, uncluttered, unmasked, and unfettered by our thoughts and feelings, to directly encounter that which thinks and feels. In such a meditative state, we receive the enlightenment of noesis more than make it happen. The deeper truths of things reveal themselves to us, and it then becomes our task to find the words, images, and feelings that best reflect them, even though we know those tools will be inadequate. In Plato's allegory of the cave, he asserts that the visible world of common sense is like a cave, with a few people who will realize there is more to their existence than the fleeting shadows on the wall that were once the sole objects of their attention. They will begin ascending into the intelligible or ideal world, learn the truths of things there, and perhaps even directly look upon the beauty and glory of the sun, the form of the good. He further says that when those people return to the cave and try to explain what they know, it often sounds confused and nonsensical. They even seem to contradict or even attack common sense. Furthermore, they cannot avoid sounding self-contradictory, if for no other reason than it is paradoxical to speak of the infinite with finite terms, or to describe the oneness of all things with the dualisms inherent to human language. There is, after all, an inescapable absurdity in speaking of the ineffable. That is why the greatest teachers of philosophy are concerned with showing us a path to enlightenment about consciousness itself, rather than merely telling us what to think about the myriad things in this world. But there is something else significant in Plato's account of those who come back, and it is simply that they do come back. While the transcendent knowledge of truth is the initiated philosopher's highest aim, it is not the final objective. One of the truths such a seeker must eventually come to know is that the various levels of existence are interconnected, each a part of the one unifying truth that encompasses all. Likewise, All souls are intertwined in the mystic tie, and it would be a denial of that truth. It would be a heinous lie to attempt to completely detach oneself from the visible world and our brothers and sisters there. Furthermore, to attempt to do nothing but continually seek noesis and contemplation of our true self would, ironically, be a refusal to accept part of the whole truth of our own existence, and thus put us at odds with our real selves. With that in mind, let's finish by noting that our tradition not only leads the contemplative Mason to view with reverence and admiration the glorious works of creation and inspires one with the most exalted ideas of the perfections of the divine Creator, but it also admonishes us to extend our kind offices to all, and to let our inspirations guide us to be loving builders of wisdom, strength, and beauty in this world. Enlightened Master Masons are internally compelled to do so because they realize that the mysteries of the divine and of existence are present here and now, and that you are the mysteries just as they are. Thank you for joining me in this consideration of being the very mysteries we seek to know. I wish you more light, life, and love.